Is it too late to stop World War III, or has it already started and we're just going through the early stages of proxy wars? The weapons of war, they're not just over there, as they were in previous wars when standing armies fought in kinetic engagements. Today, we can be impacted by a weapon of war tied to a keyboard on a computer from really any corner of the world. And while you might not see troops ever rolling into your town on tanks and armored vehicles, the fallout and repercussions of a large global conflict will inevitably be felt by you no matter where you live. In this video, I'm going to explore the possibility that it's too late to stop World War III. We're going to try to help you understand it through current theories, but most importantly, I'm going to clue you in at the end of the video to solid, tangible things that you can do right now. So even if World War III is unavoidable, you can survive it. You're going to want to stick around to the end to hear about that. Possible to plausible. The current global situation could devolve into a third world war in just more than a few ways. Let me just throw out a few possible scenarios. One, a nuclear-armed Iran threatens Israel, prompting U.S. intervention and escalating into a global conflict with Russia, which probably provided Iran the nuclear material it needed in exchange for support in Ukraine. Or an unexpected attack on the West infrastructure, information systems, and possibly even satellites by Eurasian states leads to massive disruption, chaos, mutual accusations, and global military mobilizations and counterstrikes. Or China's invasion of Taiwan met with U.S. intervention, escalates into a conflict involving multiple countries throughout Eurasia and Oceania, sea battles, land incursions, and possibly tactical nuclear weapons. North Korea and Russia support China, and Europe is warned to stay out, resulting in a prolonged, intensifying conflict. Or the U.S. becomes so politically divided that it is forced to withdraw from the world stage. NATO and the G7 lose cohesion, following authoritarian leaders to seize territories globally in a power grab, turning the world into a live version of the board game Risk. BRICS dominates the world and establishes a new world order to replace the Western hegemony. And that's just 4 possible scenarios. But I'll be the first to admit that there are many more that we could list. Now, there have always been scenarios, and in the last century, these were scenarios dominated by conflicts with the Soviets or random acts of terror from state-sponsored terrorists. So what makes these different? Now, the first thing distinguishing these new scenarios from the old is their sheer volume. There are more ways now for everything to unravel in the biggest imaginable way than there were in the past. And Hollywood doesn't really have to dig too deep to make up villains, space invaders, predators, or time-traveling Terminators because there's plenty of real-life drama to write scripts about. Now, second, there's a real possibility we could see several of the scenarios play out all at once, leading to fires everywhere instead of just one big explosion somewhere. What was just once remote possibilities has really moved to plausible, tangible events that countries are now taking measures to protect themselves against. Let me state this before we move on to the next point. I think it's important to acknowledge the gravity of the moment that we find ourselves living in. And clearly, the relative peace that we've enjoyed for the last 30 years is now gone. We're living on a knife's edge with multiple real possibilities that could play out. And that does not mean our fate is sealed to an all-out war, but let's be honest. Things could escalate, shift one way or the other very rapidly. And this is why we do what we do as preppers. Thanks to Incogni for sponsoring this YouTube ad-free video. When you provide personal information at grocery stores, websites, doctor's offices, restaurants, online searches, or elsewhere, it gets entered into a database connected to the internet. Your information, name, address, date of birth, social security number, phone number, shopping habits, and more is vulnerable to exploitation. How many times have you been notified that a site with your information was hacked? Your personal data is inaccessible. A hacker only needs to piece together small bits of information from various hacked sites to build a profile for you quickly. Think about the last time you received a spam call or phishing email. They obtained your information, which can now be used against you for identity theft, fraud, and invasive marketing tactics. Incogni solves this problem by removing your data that's floating around online. And with live progress reports, you can see it scouring and cleaning the web of all your loose data. I've been using it for over a year, and I've seen a significant drop in phishing emails, spam emails, and calls. I feel safer knowing less of my information is accessible to malicious actors. Incogni is risk-free for 30 days, allowing you to try it out with a full refund if you're not satisfied. Take back your personal data with Incogni. Use code PREPPING with the link below and get 60% off an annual plan. Power transition theory. To really understand the current geopolitical landscape and the most likely scenario that will play out in the coming years, we need to discuss the power transition theory. Now, this theory developed during the Cold War explains global power dynamics and potential conflicts between states. It posits that major conflicts are most likely when a rising power approaches or surpasses the dominant power in economic or military capabilities. Now, this theory is especially relevant as Western influence and power seem to be waning in the face of a rising China and a defiant Russia and Iran. And the theory suggests that these shifts in power dynamics increase the potential for conflict as the established order is now challenged by emerging powers. Power dynamics, they're shifting worldwide. And as old leadership pushes the current geopolitical strategies, power shifts could become more extreme. Putin and Xi are 71 years old, and Trump and Biden are still older. And these leaders have an urgency to force their policies and world vision. And those waiting in the wings to assume control when they pass could have more extreme agendas or could radically alter course when they assume leadership. Also, the power vacuum created whenever any one of these aged leaders passes could suck their respective country into civil unrest. And when a superpower even temporarily recedes from the influence it holds over the world, the remaining superpowers can be emboldened into sparking conflicts or seizing territories, resources, or assets as they really realign their long-term objectives. And the world's march towards conflict is increasingly fueled by desperate competition for resources driven by economic imperatives and environmental changes. For example, countries like Russia, China, and the United States, they're aggressively pursuing land and resources in the newly accessible polar regions. Meanwhile, due to heat-induced crop failures, India faces mounting challenges in feeding its population. The ongoing war in Ukraine further strains global grain supplies, while OPEC Plus maintains control over oil prices. A clandestine fleet of ships secretly distributes Russian oil worldwide in defiance of sanctions. In these geopolitical maneuvers, they really underscore the critical role of resources such as oil and minerals, which are essential for both economic prosperity and military strength. Competition for these finite resources intensifies as rising powers seek to bolster their capabilities, shaping global power dynamics and driving potential conflict. Now, there's clearly an out-of-balance shifting power when it comes to resources and future resources. And this power transition theory views the international system as a hierarchy, with the dominant power at the top, followed by great powers, middle powers, and smaller states. And as rising powers gain strength, they often seek to challenge the status quo established by the dominant power and its affiliate order, policies, and peacekeeping organizations. Now, this theory highlights the instability and potential for conflict during the transition period when a rising power's capabilities approach those of the dominant power. And this is especially true if the rising power is dissatisfied with the current international system and desires to change it to reflect its own interests and values. Now, historical examples such as the rise of Germany before World War I and Japan before World War II really illustrate how shifts in the balance of power can lead to major conflicts, a concern that is now echoed in discussions about the United States, Europe versus China and Russia in the 21st century. Now, countries worldwide are beginning to align themselves with their preferred future superpowers, and these leading nations are eagerly accepting the support. North Korea is aligning closely with Russia and has announced plans to send troops to support Russian forces in the Donetsk region of occupied Ukraine. China and Russia have entered into several mutually beneficial agreements and secret deals which exclude the West. And meanwhile, several Middle Eastern countries are playing both sides of the tension between Russia and the United States to maximize their profits through favorable deals or by turning a blind eye to problematic factions within their borders. Finland and Sweden have joined NATO, and other countries are planning to join under the organization's open door policy. Now, additionally, military-ruled nations in Africa, they're trading their mineral resources for weapons to maintain their authoritarian grip on power. And this trend of global realignment is clear as nations declare their positions in the ongoing international struggle. From the power transition theory viewpoint, there's no denying that powers are shifting and that scales are swinging wildly out of balance. Old is being replaced by new, and at least one superpower will rise to instigate a greater conflict, implode, or be moved to some action of desperation. The questions we're asking. Right now, we are asking ourselves, which scenario is most likely to play out? Taiwan invasion, cyber attack on infrastructure, Russian expansionism, Arctic resource grab, Middle East conflict, nuclear or EMP, and so forth. But those are the wrong questions. Those are just the scenarios that governments prepare themselves against. The fact is, we're likely to see a little of all of those scenarios occurring simultaneously. It's possible there may not be just one source of ignition, one massive intensive fire, but many. It's possible there won't be just one massive explosion, but hundreds of smaller fires that are already lit and smoldering now. So we should be asking ourselves, will it blow up in one big punctuating event? Or will it just smolder as it has been doing with the occasional brief flare-up? Will one or more major power player collapse, implode, or have the significant change in leadership by death, assassination, economic collapse, or uprising? And we don't know the answers to those questions, but we should watch them closely. We do know that combined, they can drag economies and a country's stability down. And let's accept that a future global war is likely inevitable. Wars throughout history and into the present have been driven by various motives, from religious beliefs and territorial expansion to resource acquisition and the pursuit of power. These motivations have persisted across millennia, and they're going to continue in our collective future. The pursuit of power, it remains a potent force driving wars, fueled by leaders' ambitions and the ardent support of their followers. And despite hopes for a peaceful world post-Cold War, the enduring reality is that warfare continues due to ingrained human instincts, ensuring that the specter of future conflicts remains ever present. Now, here at City Prepping, we feel that we're already in the beginning, potentially middle stages of this new world war. There doesn't really appear to be anything immediately on the horizon that might divert the world from its current trajectory that bends toward a larger, more explosive conflict. And if we're being honest, this isn't going to go away anytime soon. Again, the questions we should be asking are more concerned with the form of this growing future conflict and are less about what it will look like when it comes to fruition. Solution mindset. So if you know the hurricane is coming on a direct path towards you, do you just set up a lawn chair in your front yard and watch it come in, or do you take measures to ensure your safety and your survival to the day after it passes? Do you batten down the hatches and check your rations, or do you throw a party? You should plug in known solutions that are effective at increasing your odds of surviving the event before the event is upon you. So what can you do when the event is world war? Well, you really have to understand how that can impact you. During the first two world wars, it meant boots on the ground, perhaps trampling through your vineyards and farms, robbing you of resources, killing and pillaging. And it doesn't necessarily mean that today. All the armies of Europe and Asia could not by force take a drink from the Ohio River or make a track on the Blue Ridge in the trial of 1,000 years. Today, you're most likely to be impacted by cyber attacking the other preemptively or in retaliation. So you know that cyber attacks will be on your nation's infrastructure, financial networks, citizen cyber and identity security, and so forth. Your solutions are to protect your online presence and have ulterior means of providing necessary infrastructure, whether that's energy, food, water, shelter, medicine, and so forth. And in scenarios where unconventional weapons such as EMPs or biological agents may be employed, readiness includes knowing how to effectively shelter in place for extended periods, maintaining sufficient reserves of essential supplies, and having well-defined bug-out and evacuation plans. You know that your nation engaging in war at any level is going to drain resources away from citizens and divert them into the military-industrial complex. And that's going to weaken your economy. The prep against that is utilizing your preps in your daily life, rotating through them, reaping the cost benefit, and beating inflation. Being proactive in your preparation enhances your personal resilience and contributes to your overall community resilience in the face of potential disruptions. And by planning and adapting to potential threats now, individuals and communities can better mitigate the impacts of global instability and ensure a more secure future, regardless of the challenges that may arise. Temporarily bringing your neighborhood offline and withdrawing from the global and national community, a circling of the wagons sort of approach, it may be your best chance of survival when the rest of the world is engulfed in flaming chaos, but is your community, network, and local infrastructure capable of going it alone? Are you in an area where you would even want to help or be part of the greater community if there was an SHTF event? What are you doing now to lay the groundwork for this future possibilities? real solutions. Just as your country is probably preparing for multiple geopolitical scenarios, you should as well. Minimally, ensure that you have 3 weeks of food, water, and medicine on hand to reduce your exposure to the disruptions of a world war. I have videos on that, which I'll link to in the comments and description section below. Food security, it may seem rather trivial and meaningless when facing the daunting prospect of a global war, but let me assure you, it's a little work now that will pay in great dividends later. If your grid goes down for whatever reason, you know you'll have at least 3 weeks to survive while stability is restored or to help you get through whatever next phase of your life is going to be. The simple fact is that the more independent and self-sufficient you become, even in small ways, the less acceptable you are to the fallout from global conflicts. And look, I'll be honest, I think there are more potential flare-ups smoldering worldwide than ever. And I think a future world-involved conflict is pretty much unavoidable at this point, but how you meet the challenges of the future is largely in your control right now. Every minute you spend preparing for an uncertain future will pay you back in hours and days when things fall apart. I would encourage you to check out the 2 videos I'll post here on the side of the screen. One details how to quickly build a 3-week emergency food supply that you can store for years, and the other is a link to our playlist on water storage, which has plenty of easy-to-follow videos. As always, stay safe out there.